My goodness, this program sounds too good to be true.
A cross-country program is giving military veterans information they need to start a second career online.
It's a program aimed at helping veterans find employment in Canada's tech sector.
A mobile kiosk rolled into Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu today outside the Royal Canadian Legion.
The Coding for Veterans caravan has stopped on base at CFB Petawawa, offering opportunities in the digital world for a life after the military.
Unfortunately, a lot of the very job-specific skill sets that I learned through the artillery weren't exactly going to be translatable into any kind of civilian career.
It was definitely a big question in my mind as to what I was going to do next.
He was an intelligence officer in the Air Force and came across a team called Coding for Veterans.
Through an immersive, online, self-paced learning program, gives those individuals the opportunity, the skills to work in software development or cybersecurity.
My program is called the Cybersecurity Architect, which, to tell you the truth, sounds pretty good on a resume.
I'm an IT service support technician with the municipality of Stratford-Caradoc.
I think it would complement what I've done in my career as a military person.
Things like attention to detail, leadership, teamwork, it actually aligns perfectly with the soft skills of the best and the brightest in the tech industry.
The cybersecurity stuff for me was a great transition.
They went from serving on the battlefield to now serving in cyberspace.
Jeff Musson is Executive Director of Coding for Veterans. He joins us now. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Leslie. We're actually up in Bagotville right now in Quebec.
The not-for-profit is in its third year of bringing troops from deployment to employment.
Corporal Adam Broughton has always been interested in the tech world. He's been stationed in North Bay for 3 years and is looking at possibly branching out for other opportunities after retirement.
And today, Dean, there's over 200,000 open jobs in job titles related to what we teach.
IT is growing faster and faster, and there are needs for specific skills.
These men and women that leave the forces, they have security clearances. And so those in the cybersecurity area that hire these individuals, that becomes an added bonus.
We actually have students that are being hired in the civilian industries before they're even fully complete their training.
We have a placement rate of 95% of people when they graduate from our program.
Amazing, considering many people who graduate entered the program with almost no background in IT.
We have banks, we have government agencies, all just literally lining up to interview the candidates in the program.
The nonprofit recently expanded eligibility to include Afghan interpreters.
And we've raised tuition to pay 100% of the cost in our program for interpreters that want to enroll and have a career in tech once they get to Canada.
So it's no cost to them at all?
No cost to them at all.
Getting here would be one thing. Finding your way to make a living here would be another thing. To help them find that way to be skilled to engage in a rewarding career for the rest of their lives.
Those interpreters, in the minds of men and women in our military, they've served.
He arrived in Canada just 2 months ago as a refugee and has applied to the Coding for Veterans program.
That's my dream. I want that to become true, to be involved maybe on a big project or on a big software, a software program.
Nothing would make us happier than to help support these Afghan interpreters that supported our mission over in Afghanistan.
This is a tremendous opportunity for those who have the interest, who have the aptitude, and have the motivation to find a new career.
And I think Coding for Veterans, it puts you in a group of your peers. These are all individuals that you already have something in common with.
Today, Musson was at the Toronto Stock Exchange ringing the bell to kick off the day's trading. A symbolic gesture to show companies the value of hiring a veteran.
It's really a way to promote an opportunity and an avenue for businesses in Canada to understand the value that someone from the military can bring to their company.
Veterans who have served at least 6 years will have their tuition paid in full through Veterans Affairs, Canada's education and training benefit.
It is a great course, and it is very rewarding.
It's worked out really well.
Shelley Steeves, Global News, Moncton.
Natalie Kalana, CBC News, Toronto.
Jessica Nisnik, Global News.
Dylan Dyson, CTV News, Petawawa.
Kate Otterbein, XFM News.
Eric Tashner, CTV News, North Bay.
In Toronto, Erica Natividad, City News.
Rich Garten, CTV News.
Kayla Karim, Global News, Kingston.
Brian Vicknell, CTV News.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Quantum Computing Cybersecurity and Identity Protection webinar. I am your host, Kim Geddes. We are live today on YouTube and Facebook. We will welcome in your questions and comments as we get to the Q&A session of our panel discussion today. The webinar is part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and it's brought to you by IBM, Coding for Veterans, and the University of Ottawa Professional Institute. Coding for Veterans, as you may know, is an organization that retrains military veterans for jobs in software development and cybersecurity. Jeff Musson is the executive director. Jeff is part of our panel discussion today. Serge Blais will be here as well. He is the executive director of the University of Ottawa Professional Institute, bringing together professional development opportunities for leaders in private, public, and government organization. And our special guest today is Sean Wagner. He's a research scientist, and he's the Quantum Technical Advisor at IBM. And it will be Sean who will take us through the PowerPoint presentation today on quantum computing. And to help us understand where this revolutionary technology is going, what it's capable of, and the challenges ahead as organizations make the transition to quantum safe standards. Well, I want to start with telling you that today's webinar is actually the 12th and final episode of our One Click to Cyber Chaos podcast series. You will see on your screen this afternoon this QR code where you can go to download our podcast series and give it a listen. We're on Sounder, but it will also take you to whatever platform you listen to your favorite podcasts. Again, that QR code to download our One Click to Cyber Chaos podcast series is there for you. So it was about, 6 months ago when we started our series, and we really wanted to ignite the conversation around cybersecurity and knowing that it's not a matter of if, but when we will be targeted by cyber criminals. We covered a lot of ground in our series, and we started with the attack methods and who are the bad guys behind the attacks. And we went into ransomware and disinformation campaigns, state-sponsored actors, and poison data. We, of course, drilled down on the targets and why, critical infrastructure, hydro, healthcare, AI, smart cities. We covered it all. A lot of ground here, a lot of takeaways, and we emerged knowing there are a lot of common threads that we have experienced in this space. On the issue of prevention, I think it's safe to say that we've learned that you can never completely prevent a cyber breach, a data breach, but you can mitigate the risk. Cybersecurity is not a one checkbox exercise. It continues to evolve. It's about training and education, cybersecurity planning and testing, implementing the right policies and the right standards. This must be built in. This is a part of doing business today. And leaders have realized that cybersecurity must be treated with the same importance as traditional health and safety standards in the workplace. Cybersecurity must be ingrained in the culture if the organization is to be effective. And how to create resiliency in your cybersecurity systems. The pandemic taught us many, many things. But I think fundamentally, it didn't matter what size of company you operated or what kind of data and networks you were trying to protect. If something was of value to you and your company, then it was worth the time and effort of an attacker to try to deny you access to it. Lots of sectors were hit, particularly education and healthcare. It really became a challenge for organizations to conduct good cyber hygiene because employees were working remotely. And what has emerged as a result is a realization that hardening defenses is no longer the single job of the IT shop. It is top down and driven by the CEO, the president, and communicated regularly to managers and employees. And we learned the business conversation has shifted. Companies are now making decisions on who to do business with at every step in the supply chain based on how cyber secure they really are. Part of the challenge we've learned about trying to stay one step ahead of the cyber criminals is the reality that this is still largely an unreported crime, and that really makes it difficult to examine the data and just get a scope of how big the problem is. And there's a real sense in Canada, too, that we need to be, we're not as aggressive enough, not proactive enough in sharing threat intelligence. There's still a lot of information sharing not happening within companies, certainly not happening between companies. Still have lots of work to do in regulations and penalties. And making the general public aware and educated on the threats in this war. And perhaps one of the biggest security issues that played out in real time for us this past summer was the Rogers network failure. And I think for the average Canadian, they realized just how dependent they are on cell phones and internet service. And telecom providers learn the importance of designing and testing redundancies and redundant infrastructures. It amplified the conversation around consumer rights and consumer protections, and certainly the broader issue of competition in the market, and that continues today. Basically, technology has changed the playing field for cyber criminals, and it will continue to do so, which leads us to quantum computing and the quantum computing of tomorrow. The reality is it is a cyber security risk today. So let's bring in Sean Wagner to the show. Sean will take us through his quantum computing PowerPoint presentation. So Sean, I will pass it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Kim, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here at the Coding for Veterans podcast. It's my pleasure to be here. And so what I'm going to be doing now is giving you a brief overview of what quantum computing is, and give you kind of a sense of what it's good for, but also this challenge that we have to cybersecurity with the implementation of quantum computers that we would have in the future, and show you why now is the time to actually start and look at your organizations and your business, and also in your careers to examine, what we need to do in order to make our systems quantum safe. So with that, let's transition into the slide deck over here. So again, I'm from IBM, and so IBM has been working on quantum computers now for a number of years, and we've introduced some of the some state-of-the-art technology is in the past number of years, but we're also actively working on making sure that organizations can make their systems safe against a potential attack from a quantum computer. And so that is possible, and I'll take you through how that actually works and what we're doing to actually implement new cryptography that will not be susceptible to quantum computers. Okay, so IBM has been interested in quantum computing, as have many industries, for a number of reasons, right? So we're interested in solving some really big challenges that we have on our planet. And so this is just 4 different scenarios that we have here. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are kinds of things that we think about. We think about agriculture. We think about the energy and chemicals industries. We think about the financial industry, and we also think about life sciences. And so there are many problems where we can use, say, computational technology to, say, simulate the chemistry in, say, producing fertilizers or producing new drugs to combat bacterial strains. But there are some problems that remain unsolved, right? And the reason is we have these limitations with even the largest supercomputers that we have on the planet. We can do lots of things, but there are certain problems that are just out of reach. And so it's those kind of problems that we look towards a quantum computer to help us solve. So a quantum computer does process information or does computation in some similar ways to how, say, your laptop does computations or, say, compute servers in the cloud, and that we have these basic elements that we call bits, right? So a bit can be a 0, 1, and we can have collections of bits, and this represents large amounts of data. We can have megabytes and gigabytes worth of this data. In a quantum computer, we similarly have these things called quantum bits. We call them qubits for short. And like a bit, they can also be either a 0 or 1. But a quantum computer is also able to exploit the principles of quantum mechanics. And in this case, one of the principles that we take advantage of is this idea of a quantum superposition. What this really means is that we can take a qubit and we can put it into a state where it is a combination of both 0 and 1 at the same time. And so in doing this, we're able to represent a much larger amount of information in a qubit than we could with just a single qubit or with a single bit. Now, if we have lots of these qubits together, we can represent what we refer to as an exponentially increasing amount of information. Every time we add a qubit to this quantum computer, we actually double the amount of information we can hold into it. If I wanted to do that with a classical computer, I actually have to double the total number of bits in order to be able to double the amount of information. So a quantum computer here has the ability to scale in a way that we can't do with our classical computers. And so we operate with these quantum bits or qubits using what we call a quantum circuit. And a quantum circuit is simply a set of operations that we perform on these quantum bits to manipulate their state. And the goal of any algorithm or any quantum circuit that we build on our quantum computer is to take in all this information and eventually to distill it down to a single answer to whatever problem it is that we're trying to solve. So we may be solving an optimization problem. We want to figure out, okay, what's the configuration of all the different variables and different entities within the system to give us, say, the best cost or the best price or something like that in the end. And so we can use a quantum computer to solve those kinds of problems. Now, just to give you an idea of what we can achieve, or rather what the limitations are of a classical computer and where a quantum computer really helps us, is this example here. So this is a chemistry example. We're going to look at a caffeine molecule. Okay, so caffeine, it's in every cup of coffee. I have mine right here. And there are billions of caffeine molecules in there. So if you look at the chemical formula that's on your screen there, that's a caffeine molecule. It has about 24 atoms in it, about 100, say, electrons, moving all about this molecule here. It looks like it's reasonably simple, right? That we could, if we had a reasonably powerful computer, that we could, tell all the properties of this. We could figure out what kind of energy it contains, all these sorts of things. These are the kinds of things that we'd want to know about if we wanted to, say, synthesize this molecule, or to be able to figure out how this molecule reacts with other molecules. Maybe we could figure out why caffeine kind of helps us keep us awake, right? Or we could, use it for other conditions. If we could figure out how the underlying physics of this works. Well, it turns out that it's not a simple problem to find out, say, all the energy configurations of a molecule, even as simple as caffeine. If we were to represent the total amount of configurations, the energy configurations of that molecule, we would need 10 to the power 48 digital bits to represent that. Okay, so that's a 1 followed by 48 zeros, and you can see that on the screen there. To put that in perspective, if we were to represent every one of those bits using just one atom each, we would need the equivalent number of atoms as there is about 1 to 10% of the atoms in the Earth. So we need 1 to 10% of the atoms in the Earth to represent all the energy configurations of the caffeine molecule. That's clearly not a practical system we could ever build, right? We can't build a classical computer on that scale. However, with a quantum computer, I only need 160 logical qubits. So that's a much more practical size of machine that we can actually build. So today we have machines that are 127 physical qubits. Now, I will preface that we just talk about physical qubits in our current systems. We don't talk about logical qubits yet. Reason being that a logical qubit is error corrected. So our systems right now do have noise in them. They do produce errors, but we are on the path to scaling up our systems such that we can implement error correction algorithms that would allow us to eventually have 160 error corrected qubits and to be able to simulate molecules like caffeine. So this is what we can do that we can't do with a classical computer. We can do these types of really big problems, these really big calculations using a quantum computer. So here is a list of kind of the areas that we're exploring for quantum computing. When we talk about simulating quantum systems, this is about like chemistry, use cases such as drug discovery, producing new battery chemistries for, say, the next generation of electric car, those sorts of things. Artificial intelligence, of course, that's playing out big in just current, classical computing. We believe that quantum computing will help us tackle some of the challenges that we're seeing in computing these very large artificial intelligence models. And I mentioned optimization problems before, and these exist in just about every business. You think about problems such as, how do you optimize, say, a set of airplanes, where they're going to be flying to, and the crews that also staff all those airplanes. These are big optimization problems where if you're able to find the lowest possible cost, right, you can benefit your business by quite substantially and save, potentially, millions of dollars, that sort of thing. So these are kind of the general key areas that we're working in, and we're working with our partners and clients on these various use cases. So there's a lot of good we can do with a quantum computer. However, there is this one problem. Quantum computers of sufficient size, which we don't have yet, could compromise our cryptographic systems. So right now, whenever you exchange data over the internet, you should be doing over a secure connection that's secured using protocols like TLS or SSL, and these use encryption algorithms under the hood. Well, it turns out that our quantum computers could break those cryptography systems. So I'll get into how this works. So here's a depiction of, say, problems that we could solve using computing technology. And in the middle, we have classically solvable problems using classical computers. We have a bunch of problems that we can't address adequately today using our existing technology. The dark blue area shows problems that we could tackle with a combination of both quantum and classical systems. And so these are things like I mentioned before, like chemistry problems, like machine learning problems, optimization problems. One of those problems, though, is a mathematical problem called factoring. Factoring is essentially if I have some large number and I want to find all the numbers that would, if you multiply them together, would give you that large number. And so finding those smaller numbers is called factoring. A lot of our encryption systems are based on this idea that factoring is a hard problem and that it would take a classical computer a very long time to crack or to factor a number. And I'll show you why this is. So here's an example of a large number. So you see this 2048-bit composite number, right? I'm not sure. I don't think I'm showing all the digits here, but it would be a very large number. This is the basis for what we call public key encryption. So for instance, the RSA standard. This number is made up of two smaller prime numbers. So in this case, P and Q. And so what your computer does to generate this key is it generates these two random numbers, P and Q. It verifies that they're prime. And then if they are, it multiplies them together and it gives you this large number. That large number is then forms part of your public key in a public key encryption system. So this is what you send out to other people such that they can encrypt messages and then send them to you. And then you have a private key that allows you to decrypt messages coming from those other people. So you're kind of giving away part of this number, right? However, if somebody were to try to break this key, right, they would essentially have to find P and Q. You need P and Q in order to come up with the decryption key. But factoring a large number like this 2048-bit number would take a very long time. And on a classical computer that we could build today, we estimate it would take 1 million years, somewhere in that order. So it seems secure. However, the problem is that with a quantum computer running an algorithm known as Shor's factoring algorithm, could factor that number in a matter of hours. So much faster. So we have a significant problem. If we have this quantum computer that's large enough to run Shor's algorithm, to be able to break numbers as big as 2048 bits, we could have a big problem. So here's what a fault-tolerant quantum computer in the future would be able to do. It would be able to crack our public key encryption systems. So things like RSA, ECC, which is elliptic curve cryptography. It could compromise digital signatures. So whenever you authenticate a document, you sign it using a key, and that shows other people that this document came authentically from you. Key exchange algorithms is another thing that would be broken by this. So this is a problem. The second part here would also be a weakening of other crypto algorithms that we use. Things like hashing algorithms, symmetric key encryption, so like AES. And also when we store passwords, we tend to store them in this hashed form. And so hashing algorithms would be compromised. And so passwords stored on systems in the cloud safe would be compromised. And this is due to another quantum algorithm called Grover's algorithm. Now that one isn't quite as big a problem. We can say double the key length, and that would improve the security of those and make it more resistant to quantum attack. But for the public key encryption systems, we have to find an alternative. And here's the reason why we have to do this now. Hackers can be stealing data now that's encrypted and then decrypted later. So what we have to do is we have to examine all the data that we have right now that hackers might be taking from us, right? And we have to say, well, how valuable would this data be to a hacker, say, like several years down the line? So we have to kind of like take this inventory. If we look at, say, like health data, health data may have like a very long time span over which it needs to remain secure. Tax records may require, a certain amount of time as well. There's lots of amounts of data. Each one of them has a different lifetime. And so we really have to examine what the impact could be on the data that we have now, not the data that we'll have in the future when a quantum computer will exist that could break these keys. So the good news is we actually do have quantum safe cryptographic algorithms that exist now that have been found to be quantum safe, meaning that we wouldn't be able to crack these mechanisms using a quantum computer in the future. So you'll see here we have algorithms for public key encryption. We have algorithms for digital signatures and hashing. I'll point out that 3 of these algorithms here, which are going through the standardization process now through the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, 3 of these algorithms were actually developed by IBM. So we're very much invested in making sure that we have both sides. We are bringing quantum computing technology, but we're also bringing quantum safe technology as well. So these can be implemented today, though they are still going through the standardization process, but we have the code, we have the algorithms. So what will it take for an organization to be able to implement all this? So our researchers have thought about this, and we've come up with kind of this scheme you see on here, and it's a 4-step process. So the first of all is about discovering the data that you have. Where is it? What kind of data do you have? What security mechanisms do you have existing already on that data? And how long must it be kept confidential? From there, step 2 is really taking an inventory of your cryptographic algorithms, looking at the libraries you've used, looking at the, is it data at rest? Is it data that's being transmitted? That sort of thing. From there, we want to look at your crypto agility. How easy is it for you to change the algorithms running on your systems to become quantum safe? And so really it's about, can you update the algorithms quickly, change them, monitor, and then eventually retire old crypto standards. So we need to actually do that first before we can even get to quantum safe. We need to make sure that you're agile, that you can change and adapt. And then finally, once we're able to get to that point of agility, then we can start implementing the quantum safe cryptographic algorithms. And so this is going to be a very huge and monumental effort that will have to happen over the next few years in order to make sure that we have enough lead time before quantum computers become capable. We need to be able to secure our systems basically right now, actually. So now is a good time to be able to skill up and look at how you can start with quantum safe. Okay, so that's the message that I have for you there. So quantum computing, great applications, going to help us solve a lot of problems, but we have to make sure that we're also quantum safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sean. We are now going to move into the Q&A portion of our panel discussion today, and we have our audience who are watching us and listening in on YouTube and Facebook. So again, if you have questions, any comments for our panelists, for Sean in his presentation, please send them our way, and we will take a look at them and certainly populate them and get the conversation going. We have brought in Jeff Musson and Serge to the conversation. I want to start us off with a question to Sean with a part of that presentation at the very end of it. You were telling us, Sean, that, quantum computers have the ability to decrypt algorithms where we protect data. But there are already, the good news, you said, there are already quantum safe algorithms. But what percentage of companies and organizations have already migrated to that and are using the quantum safe algorithms?
I don't have a figure for you in the terms of the percentage, but I would argue it's probably very, very few. Reason being that these algorithms were only introduced by the National Institute for Standards and Technology, or NIST, in the United States as the ones that they wanted to standardize, the ones that went through the whole process of being evaluated and considered by experts across the field who have validated that these algorithms are indeed quantum safe. That only happened this past year. So now that we have that kind of certification and confidence level in these algorithms, we can start implementing them. But it's still early days for companies to begin this transition into it. But the point is they exist, and now is time to learn how to actually implement them.
So still very early days, as you've just said. So then what is the sense of urgency? I mean, why should we be concerned about quantum safe cryptography now?
We need to be concerned about it because of the fact that hackers could be harvesting data now and decrypting it later. And so let's say you have your tax records, right? And let's say that those are encrypted on some system out there. Somebody could take that data, it's encrypted now, but be able to decrypt it later and find out what happened in your, say, tax records, 7 years ago. And that could still be, say, damaging in some way. They could find some way to exploit that information. So the point is that we have to start implementing these algorithms today to protect data today that could be decrypted later on.
Mm-hmm. Serge Blais, did you want to chime in here? You've got lots of questions, I understand, for Sean.
Yeah, so every time I hear Sean, I have 50 more questions, but this is very enlightening, but reassuring and freaky at the same time. I mean, it's mind bending how how quantum, the underlying science itself is kind of mystical to me, but how powerful it is. And to your question, Kim, I'm thinking, and that's an example I think that Sean had given in the past, is medical records as well. You can imagine your medical records being encrypted, well kept, being stolen and decrypted sometime later. This is not obviously something that is worth looking forward to. Sean, a very basic question, Sean. so you've talked about, I mean, the science is there now. A lot is happening in the labs. You're experimenting with a lot of things. A silly question maybe, but are there quantum computers out there now? Like, I mean, or is this still a concept or a theoretical concept?
No, we do have real quantum computers right now from several vendors. IBM has had real quantum computers in the cloud since 2016. So we did start out with some small systems, but we've over time we have upgraded these systems. We have improved, say, the noise in the systems. We've increased the number of quantum bits on each one of the processors and essentially made them more capable every year. So the trend we're seeing right now is that we're able to double the capacity in the systems almost every year. And so we're very quickly approaching the point where we could have a system that is capable enough to be able to break encryption systems, but also to be able to run a lot of the good stuff we want to do, right? So we still want to do lots of chemistry type problems. We still want to look at artificial intelligence and solve optimization problems. And these are all things that that we can do today to a certain extent with the systems that we have available. The one thing I will point out that today, even though we do have systems that are quite large and whatnot, it still hasn't been definitively demonstrated that we can do something on a quantum computer that's of practical use better or faster or more efficiently than we can do on a classical computer. So that's a point what we call a quantum advantage, right? And so we haven't really been able to demonstrate that yet, and that's industry-wide. But we do believe that this is going to be coming in the next few years. And at some point after that, we'll get to a point where the systems are quite large.
Hey, Sean, I just wanted to follow up there. So I come from an entrepreneurial background. With their really seeming like there's a relatively few number of quantum computers, how would entrepreneurs that may want to start up a business and what have you, does IBM end up partnering in with third parties to allow for access on these quantum computers, or can entrepreneurs somehow rent space no different than how you sort of rent take space with saving storage in the cloud, for instance?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do make our systems available through the IBM cloud, and other vendors do as well. So this is generally going to be the model that will be going forward, at least for the next several years, where these quantum computers will be in cloud data centers and accessible to basically anybody, right, through whatever programs the vendors provide. So I can just give you the example of what we do here at IBM. So we do partner with many of our large clients to provide them with access to our systems so they can start exploring use cases. But we've also established programs for startup companies and entrepreneurs to be able to access many resources beyond what we provide just for free. And by the way, we do provide free access to some of our systems too. And it's really to allow people to get started and to learn about the technology, even for entrepreneurs to do some early demonstrations of some of their concepts and ideas. But at some point, what we found is that many of those startups get to a scale and they have additional resource needs that they do require some more time on our systems. And so we do offer programs that allow them to do that. We do also offer a pay-as-you-go plan as well. And you'll find this also with other vendors through various cloud providers that you can pay for time on the systems as well. So that's something that we introduced just this past year.
I'll go back to you, Sean. There's a sense of urgency to migrate to quantum computing. Do you think, are we committed enough? Are we spending enough on research and planning and educating the masses enough to make them aware of and comfortable with this new technology?
I think that we are we're really interested in making sure that we have a healthy ecosystem of people and personnel that either coming out of our academic institutions that are trained up on how to use quantum computers to be able to realize the kinds of applications that we're looking towards in the near future. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done to implement, say, curriculum, to be able to establish even entire programs around quantum computing. But I am seeing some good signs, based on some discussions I've had with various institutions, that these things are coming. That the universities and colleges are really interested in making sure that the students that they're producing are quantum literate, to a certain extent. It's also not just about the people coming in the undergrad programs. It's also about retraining the existing workforce. So we need to be able to put in programs that offer training to professionals who've been in the industry, who have programming skills, or even have skills in other domains, right? So, for instance, I want you'd want people who are, say, in chemistry, right, to be able to leverage quantum computing to be able to do their research on, say, the next kinds of consumer products or drugs or battery technology, these sorts of things, right? So it's really about skilling up entire industries, actually, to be able to engage with quantum computing and to find the use cases for quantum computing in their specific business.
I just want to jump in. And so it's interesting, put a smile on my face. We're talking about retraining, reskilling, which is what, Coding for Veterans is all about. I thought it was very interesting, Sean, what you just said, where you actually look for domain expertise in other industries, and then you sort of layer on the quantum computing as part of that. If you were a betting person today, which are the 2 or 3 industries that are going to lead the way as it relates to quantum computing?
So my bets would be, the battery industry. There's a lot that needs to be done there to start looking at electric cars on mass for the population. We still need to do a lot of research on the battery technology, and quantum computing can certainly help us figure out what the chemistry should be to be the most optimal. Another area is finance, believe it or not. Banking is very invested in using computing technology to do things like scoring risk on certain investments, to scoring loans to people, to predicting pricing in markets and things like that. And so for a lot of the simulations that they do on classical computing, they could benefit from potentially doing these with quantum computers instead, and be able to leverage some of the scale that exists from those systems to, say, do things like optimize a portfolio, for a client. So that's actually a very challenging problem to do. So that's a major area right there.
I want to just remind our audience to send questions through Facebook and YouTube, and we are getting some questions now in on the chat. But sorry, I think I cut you off, Sean.
That's okay. And one of the areas that I believe is poised to be able to leverage this is in drug discovery. So if anything, the pandemic showed us the value of science in being able to react quickly to impending, say, healthcare threats. And so while we were able to produce vaccines and therapeutic drugs in record time, compared to how we've dealt with diseases in the past, think about how much more we could have done, or how many, say, lives we could have saved if we had been able to cut that time even by half, to develop a better vaccine, to develop those therapeutic drugs. And so using computing technology, and especially quantum computing technology, may help us get there to those types of, say, drugs and therapeutics much more quickly.
I have a question here from Sebastian. He says, I'd have to assume that only large corporations would be able to afford a transition of this importance at first. Is there a plan to help smaller companies that will be left more vulnerable?
Yeah, I believe that we do have programs in place that help with that. So I mentioned our startup program, for instance. So we're helping startups with getting access to quantum computing resources to help build their businesses. But certainly the large companies do have that investment that they're able to make now. But medium companies can certainly start leveraging the capabilities that we make available. We do have, again, pay-as-you-go systems. We do have partnerships with, say, university institutions that offer programs on doing collaborative research with entities big and small. So there are all sorts of ways in which small to medium enterprises can start engaging with quantum computing technology. And I would say the first part of that is actually looking at skills development and looking at acquiring talent, but also upskilling your existing talent to make sure that they're quantum ready.
Another question here. I know you're making quantum safe encryption algorithms, but if these computers exist now, do we have the precautions in place if one of these computers were to be weaponized by a third party?
So we have quantum computers in place right now, but they are not capable enough to be able to break today's encryption standards. So that again is something that is far off on the horizon. Some have predicted it to happen, say, around the 2030 timeframe. So we do have roughly a decade or so to be able to implement quantum safe algorithms. And hopefully by that, well before that, we'll have implemented quantum safe algorithms, now or in the next couple of years, such that if somebody were to acquire that technology by, say, like the 2030 timeframe, that it would be of no use to them. Everything of value, or most things of value, have been already encrypted using quantum safe algorithms.
And as companies migrate to quantum computing, do they have to triage their systems in terms of the data they're trying to protect? That, some data like trade secrets or military secrets, they have to be protected for all time, but there are time sensitive, maybe financial data that will only have to be protected for a short amount of time. Do you have to go through it like that and triage your systems?
Absolutely, yeah. And so that's part of the data inventory step in the whole process that I spoke about. So the idea that you should have to look at your data, figure out what needs to be protected sooner rather than later, figure out what protection mechanisms you already have in place on that data, and figure out whether or not they're sufficient or agile enough to be able to transition to quantum safe. And so it really has to be a step-by-step process, looking at the various kinds of data that you need to secure.
Again, we are live on Facebook and YouTube with questions and comments coming in. Another one here to you, Sean. Since quantum computers are few and hard to build one, is the idea of using a quantum computer against cyber threats criminals? Or are we protecting these quantum computers so that it is currently impractical to get into?
Well, right now, we've generally made quantum computing available to just about anybody who wants to use it, right? And so, but we have put in protections to make sure that, say, certain organizations in certain states would not be able to get access to the systems that we provide, and that's because of embargo laws and export laws that exist right now. And so, we wouldn't have, say, an embargoed country being able to access our systems, so we do have those mechanisms available. So the other part of the question is, is the idea of using a quantum computer against cyber threats and criminals. So we haven't, I'm not aware of any specific use cases where it would be used as kind of like a counter cybersecurity mechanism. So where we counter other people from being able to break into our own existing systems. Certainly, we've explored more of what practical applications we can do for various use cases of interest, whether it's chemistry problems or AI type problems. So that's really been what we're after when it comes to using a quantum computer for purposes of good, essentially.
Serge, any more questions from you?
Yeah, I stumbled on a quote from the World Economic Forum just a couple days back, and it says, "Quantum computing could make today's cybersecurity obsolete." Sounds like a pretty strong statement to me. I mean, is that your thinking?
That is accurate to a certain extent. Essentially what we'll need to do is replace a lot of our cryptographic algorithms and software libraries that we have existing today, because a lot of them will be susceptible. So the big one is the public key encryptions mechanisms that we use today to secure mostly communications over the internet. So a lot of that will have to be swapped out. And pretty much every computer on the planet, every smartphone, every smart device that's connected to the internet should have some form of quantum safe algorithms running on them to be able to transmit and communicate with other things. Mm-hmm. So It is, it would make a lot of our security mechanisms obsolete. But the good news is that assuming a certain degree of crypto agility in various organizations, it may be straightforward, we hope, in most cases, to implement the quantum safe algorithms, to simply swap out the existing classical algorithms and put in quantum safe instead.
So I'm starting to understand your statement earlier that upskilling and reskilling is kind of critical to to the way forward here, because there will be a lot of as you say, what's called not retrofitting, but adapting our systems to this technology. But
the way I see it, it's no. It has similarities to challenges that we've had in computing before. I remember the Y2K bug, for instance. That was a worldwide problem on just about every computer that existed out there, and so there was a concerted effort to rein that in from pretty much the entire information technology sector to be able to do that. And I believe that we can mobilize the same kind of effort and forces to do the same with quantum safe.
Right.
We have another question here in the chat to you, Sean. Is there a use case presently to combat fraud and introduce a measure of resiliency into processes that make life more convenient, i.e. online election ballots and something like direct representation in today's modern democracies?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to fraud mechanisms and ways of detecting that fraud, one of the key technologies that's in place right now is using artificial intelligence. So being able to look at existing records of transactions, say financial transactions, and being able to detect which ones are fraudulent, which ones were okay. So what we anticipate with quantum computing is to be able to augment some of that AI technology that we have now running in our classical systems with quantum-based machine learning algorithms that may be able to better detect fraud than what we can do with our classical machines. And so indeed here at IBM, we have been looking at that use case, and we have some really research that actually is very promising that demonstrates that with a quantum computer, we can actually detect fraud more capably than just with a classical computer alone. So that is coming. So we could use that. We could make extensions to that and look at, say, how do you detect fraud in, say, balloting systems for elections, and could that help enable, say, online voting, things like that? Yeah, these are absolutely use cases that would be that could benefit from quantum computing.
Mm-hmm. Question here, what would be the key elements of a quantum computing technological 101 course for business leaders, for professionals responsible for the transition to quantum?
So when it comes to training business leaders, it's really about understanding the technology and what it's capable of. And so, we do have, some materials out there that from IBM. You'll find some from other places as well. They do a really good job of educating business leaders on what the capabilities of the technology is now and what it will be in the future. So it's really about looking at understanding the differences between a quantum computer and a classical computer, understanding how a quantum computer can scale, understanding the basic kinds of use cases. So for instance, in chemistry problems and in artificial intelligence and in optimization problems, and understanding how a quantum computer could, say, basically help us solve problems at a much larger scale that might be of interest to their specific businesses. So in terms of professionals that are looking to transition into quantum, so a course would, or a key element would be some basic programming skills. So most of the frameworks that we use for quantum computing are based on the Python programming language. So if you've done some work in artificial intelligence, that's a good start, because most of the AI libraries out there are also done in the Python language. So that's one thing there. Professionals may also want to invest some time looking at the various basic quantum algorithms that already exist, that we already know of, and understand what they're useful for, what kinds of problems they can solve using those algorithms. And then, get started on some actual practical coding, and play with those algorithms. use the systems that we make available through the cloud to be able to experiment and try things out on the real quantum computer and see what you get. So that's, I think those are some of the key elements. And then understanding the use cases, I guess, is the last part to, again, for professionals who are getting into the field. So similar to how the business leaders, so everybody should have an awareness of what use cases for quantum computing apply to their business.
And quantum computing, Jeff, must be part of your conversation and your curriculum and retraining of veterans in your program, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is something like our curriculum goes through a continual update every, year and a half. So as technology like this starts to really emerge and become, more mainstream, our program reflects these changes in the marketplace. And that's how you kind of remain current. And between our partnership with Surge and the University of Ottawa PDI, and having the connections in with corporate partners like IBM, I call it being on the tip of the sword, right? That we're able to know exactly what is relevant and what should be taught out there. Absolutely.
We have a new question here, something that I was going to ask, but I'll give it over to our guest here in the chat. How great of a risk would you assume quantum computing is, Sean, for creating friction between nations regarding the speed at which different countries are developing in quantum computing compared to others? Where are we in the race, the quantum computing race?
I would say the question about where are we in the race here, certainly the United States is heavily invested in development of quantum computing technology. So many of the companies that are involved in it come from the United States, including my own. So some of the most advanced technology is being built by here and our partners in, say, European countries as well. Canada is also one of the leaders in quantum computing technology. In terms of businesses, yes, we do have a number of businesses, everything from some small, medium enterprises to startups that are really engaged in quantum computing, and that really has to do with the strength of the education programs and the research institutes that have been set up here in Canada. So we have really great research happening at, say, the University of Waterloo, University de Sherbrooke, University de Montreal, UBC. University of Calgary, so they have faculty members and students who've been building quantum computers, who've been researching quantum algorithms, and developing use cases and whatnot, even engaging with the industry to start on early exploration of what we can do with it. So I would say right now Canada is definitely one of the leaders, and especially in the startup community. I mean, because of all the academic activity we have, naturally we get all these startup companies that are kind of come out of the university systems, and we've also had some great incubator organizations that have helped those startups to really build out their business there with access to resources, whether it be funding or technological resources from vendors like IBM.
One last question before we wrap things up. How are these corporations such as IBM marketing or promoting the use of quantum safe algorithms to businesses? Apart from very recently, I hadn't even been aware of quantum safe algorithms myself, Sean.
So we're really just beginning, but we have had numerous discussions. So we know the various partners and clients over the last number of years about what a quantum safe future for their systems might look like, what kinds of developments we've made in terms of the research and the algorithm development on new cryptographic schemes that are quantum safe. And so we've had those discussions over the last number of years. But I'll admit that until recently, those discussions have been few and haven't really ramped up. So we're really adamant now that we have this kind of go ahead from institution or organizations such as NIST, to say, when they said that, okay, these are the algorithms that we're going to standardize. It's really now we have some momentum behind us and some, essentially confidence level from an organization like that to be able to then go speak out to various organizations about what they should be doing to implement these algorithms and the kinds of things, the challenges that they may face and how we can overcome them. So that's really ramping up now.
So in the few seconds we have left, I'd like to get final thoughts from both Serge and Jeff. Serge, Your final thoughts.
Well, I'm old enough to remember the arrival of the computer and the Atari, the 8-bit or something like that, So again, this is mind-boggling. And thank you, Sean. Every time I hear you, I learn a lot more. I think we're on the verge of something very big, very transformative here. It's much like, cybersecurity was 20 years ago. It's like a vague concept or something that we should probably, be mindful of. And I think it's the same thing with quantum here, probably even more so, in fact, because this is hugely transformative. Can I squeeze in a quick question, Kim? Will quantum computers replace classical computers, or will these two things run in parallel in 15 seconds?
So classical computers will not replace quantum computers. There are lots of things that classical computers are still really great at. There's a lot of things that quantum computers are also really bad at. So, for instance, hosting a podcast, you wouldn't do that on a quantum computer, right? So we still have a need for classical computers for many different purposes. The way we see quantum computers is augmenting the capabilities of our classical computers, essentially as a kind of accelerator for particular kinds of use cases.
Thank you.
And Jeff.
Yeah. So, Sean, great discussion. For me, what I really like is this was the perfect subject to cover kind of on our closing episode here of season 2 with our podcast, because it's really a look into the future. And I got to tell you, I'm really excited, right? I think, as it relates to quantum and technology, the future is where it's at, and the future is now. So, thanks for your discussion, and it was really great.
Great discussion. Absolutely. I just want to remind everybody that a replay of this One Click to Cyber Chaos episode will be available and shared on the Coding for Veterans website, YouTube and Facebook pages as well. And please, download the One Click to Cyber Chaos podcast series, all 12 episodes there for you on Sounder and everywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you for watching. I'm Kim Geddes, and take care.